Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about de-veganizing and the point in comparative listening. Now, these things seem to have nothing whatsoever in common. After all, veganism is a food thing and comparative listening has to do with music and whatnot. But I actually think they do have something in common. And I want to make this point because, first of all, it's a good story. And second of all, I think there is a point somewhere buried in all of the gibberish that you're about to hear. Let me start at the beginning. I had a friend, very good friend. I still have a friend. He's a wonderful friend. And when I met him, he was a vegan. And quite frankly, he didn't look too healthy. Actually, he was very pale. And you know, he was a somewhat hardcore vegan. I mean, he spent his entire life running around eating bottles of this stuff called Vegenaise, which was this, fake mayonnaise that you slather on everything. It was disgusting. And we used to go around looking for it because it was kind of hard to source in various places. Now I think it's more readily available in case you want some. But he and I would argue about it because one of the things that annoyed me most about the whole vegan thing, people can eat whatever they want. I mean, and they should eat whatever they want because it tastes good, actually. That's the primary reason. But, if you want to make a cult out of it, which is what veganism is, it's a cult. The problem was that I'd met a lot of people, and he was one of them, who felt that there's some moral superiority thing involved in forswearing all animal products. Now, this is a completely random and relativistic position to take. I mean, I could very easily say that I believe that it's immoral to kill plants. And then where would we be? Because they're living beings, they're living creatures. I mean, I don't want to kill bacteria. They're living creatures. They live in our gut. They help us digest. I mean, God forbid that we should destroy healthy bacteria. How far does it go? That's the question, right? To me, it's a bit ridiculous. What is ridiculous is the moral superiority that people seem to indulge in because they're vegan. Now, this guy is my friend of mine. He was not that type. He did it because he thought he was being healthier, but he wasn't healthier. He looked anemic. I mean, he looked terrible. He really needed a steak. And I said to him, look, I'll make a deal with you. I said, let's go, because we used to go out to eat all the time. I said, let's go and visit every decent restaurant in New York City, a decent vegan restaurant. We're going to look them all up. We're going to see how highly they're rated. We're going to go see eat at all the best vegan restaurants and have all the best vegan food. And in the meantime, we'll try just vegetarian restaurants as well, but things that allowed you to have things like eggs and butter and, food. So one of the most amusing stops on our list was a restaurant, a vegan restaurant, which actually is quite good in Manhattan. It had two branches. There's one in Manhattan and there was one in Brooklyn that no longer exists. It was called Avant Garden. And the one in Manhattan we ate at, and it was really pretty decent. It was tasty. It was okay. The one in Brooklyn, well, they had more of an attitude. It was in Williamsburg. Williamsburg, Brooklyn, which is where all the yuppies were, and it had this sort of mindset. So we go into this restaurant and the waitress has carrot earrings. We called her Carrot Girl. And it was Carrot Day. I mean, it seemed to be Carrot Day. The main course, one of the main course options, was a carrot steak. And I just looked at her. I said, what the hell is a carrot steak? Well, turned out carrot steak was a carrot. Now, I happen to adore carrots. Carrots, I think, are delicious. I like nice, raw, crispy carrots. This was one of those horse carrots, those gigantic things that they use for animal feed. And they cut it into a slab, and they cooked it in some strange way and threw it on a plate, and they called it a carrot steak. I mean, immediately I'm annoyed because it's not a steak. Obviously, a steak is a steak. It comes from a cow, right? Usually, or some other halibut, some large meaty creature, not from a really tough, woody root vegetable best fed to the cow. So anyway, I had the carrot steak and we got through it, and we're coming up for dessert. And I said, so what do you got for dessert? She said, oh, we have delicious vegan ice cream. Well, that did it for me. I just said, it's not ice cream. I said, it can't be ice cream because it can't have cream. So it's not ice cream. I mean, why even call it that? Why don't you make sorbet? You can make non-dairy things. Why disguise something as something it isn't? There must be, I said to her, she's like sitting there going, oh, Jesus, I got a good one. I said, there must be decent desserts that you could make that are vegan that aren't called something else, that are what they are. And she's like, okay, so fine, don't have the ice cream. And I just kept going. I said, I said, are you Jewish? And she actually said, yes, she was. I said, well, you must remember this. Well, maybe you don't. You may be too young. But in the 1970s, when I was growing up, the rage at bar mitzvah dinners or luncheons or whatever they were was pareve ice cream. Pareve, in case you don't know, means it can go with milk or meat, because if you're kosher, you can't mix milk and meat products. So they invented this stuff, this pareve ice cream. It was non-dairy ice cream. It tasted like floor wax. And everybody was so excited because, oh, you could have ice cream with your prime rib. And I was always thinking, like, let's just not have ice cream. If you want to have ice cream, have ice cream. If you don't want it, it's ridiculous. So I said to her, so I don't want it. She said, okay, fine. Then we have a delicious vegan shortbread. I said, it's not shortbread. It can't be shortbread. Shortbread is flour, butter, sugar, and salt. That's it. That's what shortbread is. So we didn't have dessert. We wound up not having. But here was my point. So we went from restaurant to restaurant to restaurant, and eventually the pretentiousness of it started to get to this friend of mine. He was just kind of offended by the attitude. The worst attitude we had was at this vegan restaurant on 79th Street, I think, in East 79th Street in Manhattan, and they had something that they advertised as vegan pad thai. Now, I love Thai food, and I love pad thai. And there's nothing less vegan than Thai food because it has fish sauce on everything. So I ordered the vegan pad thai. And what did I get? It was coleslaw. It was red cabbage coleslaw. And the waiters had such attitude. They thought that they were serving you. It was like transubstantiation. They were giving you some sort of spiritual thing. And I looked at the guy and said, this is goddamn coleslaw. Take it back. Oh, they were so offended. Terribly offended. And we had, like I said, some lovely meals as well, and some wonderful vegetarian meals. We went to a vegetarian restaurant where the main course, well, you had to order in advance. You had a choice of 2 courses, and you had to call up a week ahead and tell them which one you wanted. And mine featured spiralized kohlrabi. You wondering what that is? Well, a spiralized you know what a kohlrabi is, right? It's this knobby cabbage relative thing. It's a root thing. It's like a ball of solidified cabbage. And what you do is you take a spiralizer. I have one. That's this sort of large vegetable peeler object, and you scrape all the way around your kohlrabi so it comes on one big long strip. Then you roll it back up, stick a toothpick in it, and cook it. That is spiralized kohlrabi. Turns out it was delicious the way they prepared it. Although the opening of the meal was a little odd. They brought a single microscopic potato chip for the table. They said it was an amuse. I said, I'm not amused. I mean, it was like this little potato chip. Anyway, so much for that. The bottom line is, as we went through this journey, we started doing vegetarian food, and then finally seafood. And then finally, by the end of our year or so of food adventures, he had been completely de-veganized. Now, every so often, he's still basically a vegetarian, but every so often he has himself some lamb. He likes lamb. I mean, it's good for him. And he has more red corpuscles, and he doesn't look like he's ready to drop dead at any moment. So that's a good thing. The point I want to make, and what does this have to do with comparative listening? What does any of this have to do with comparative listening? It does. What it has to do with comparative listening is this. Some people wonder why we collect 100 versions of the same thing, or why we go out and hear the same pieces over and over again. And the reason is because what it does for you is that it not only tells you what you can do with a piece of music, what its possibilities are interpretively, but it opens your mind. It opens your mind to difference, the joy of difference, while still having a piece that's a favorite piece of music. I mean, that's the point of this, isn't it? I mean, the problem with the vegan cult is that they're trying to convince you that they're giving you something that's the same as what you know already and enjoy. And it may be good. It may be an interesting version of that thing. The carrot steak might be an interesting concept, an interesting take on a steak, or it may be just hokum. But you wouldn't know that unless you know what a steak is. So you go to different restaurants, you eat different versions of steak, and you begin to have a concept of what steakitude is. And that's exactly what comparative listening is. You spend time with a piece of music, you get to know what it is, you get to hear its possibilities, and what that does, I might add, is that it not only makes you more aware of the positive possibilities inherent in listening to a piece of music, but it also makes you aware of bullshit when you hear it. And there's plenty of that going around, isn't there? There's always nonsense, and you get a better sense of how to identify and deal with the nonsense. And it's fun to encounter that. We had a great time going to all these restaurants. It's fun, but it's still nonsense. I mean, one of the great hypocrisies in veganism is that it's somehow more natural because, you're only dealing with plant matter. And so you're avoiding, things that are animalistic and cut and done and bloody. And I don't know, it's something like that. I mean, seriously. I mean, have you ever seen a cow? I mean, what is the thing for? It's a walking buffet. I mean, that's what it's designed to do. It has no other purpose except to eat. But I mean, that's another point. Anyway, so the thing is, when you get this attitude, one of the things I realized quite quickly about vegan cooking is that it's very oil heavy and very, very processed, because in order to turn innocent things like cashews or nuts or things into butters and creams and dairy substitutes and all of the things we really want to eat and should be eating and we're built to eat, that it's even more processed than any kind of processed, regular food. It's unbelievably manipulated and rendered unnatural. The fact of the matter is, an organic grass-fed piece of steak is far more natural than one of its vegan simulacra made of some sort of, industrialized plant thing. So you begin to realize when you're being fed, or through the ears fed, a lot of BS. I mean, the period instrument movement is quite similar to veganism, isn't it? In a lot of what it says, because it claims that there's an authenticity, a naturalness, a trueness to the actual original thing that modern performances don't have. Well, it's all nonsense. It's completely nonsense. And if you keep an open mind and listen comparatively, then you will understand when you're being fed nonsense. And that, for me, is one of the great joys of comparative listening. It's one of the great joys of comparative eating. One of the joys of going to different restaurants and trying different things. And don't get me wrong, I love it when people can fool me with food or with music, if it's good. I mean, molecular gastronomy can be delightful. We went to a fabulous vegetarian restaurant where they had vegetarian Big Macs, and they tasted just like the real thing. It was amazing how good they were. They had Big Mac sliders. They were delicious, and they were only made of carrots and vegetables and things. I mean, you can do good things with carrots that are not just chomping on a raw carrot like Bugs Bunny. And so my point in all of this is that my very good friend is now a happy-go-lucky omnivore, And I'm very proud of that fact, quite frankly. And we really acquired a tremendous education about vegan food culture, what's good, what isn't good, what we might want to take from it that's valuable. And, anybody who wants to do these things, that's fine, obviously. People have every right to put into their bodies or their ears or whatever they want to put into their bodies or their ears. The point is not to have a closed mind. It's to be comparative, to always be open to a new experience. I mean, it can go too far in the other direction. There are people, and we see them in the comments sometimes, who just like horrible performance of things because they're different for their own sake. And they just like differences. And to the extent anything's different from the other thing, it must be inherently good because it's different. That's also the path of pure relativism at the other end of utter dogmatism. And in a way, they're kind of the same because they both involve shutting off yourself to a kind of experience, a healthy experience of listening, of really getting to know whatever the thing is, whether it's a mushroom or a steak or it's a symphony. You want to know it from all the possible different angles, and then you can draw your own conclusions as to what pleases you or what doesn't please you. But you're only going to be able to find out if you listen carefully and comparatively, and you keep an open mind to the possibilities of what these pieces of music have to offer, while at the same time, it's a balancing act, understanding something about idiomatic style and what the ultimately acceptable parameters of interpretation are, which you also learn through comparative listening by hearing many, many different versions and hearing the similarities and the differences and the things that best serve the music and ultimately what best please you. So that's the whole disquisition. I hope you didn't mind me going off on this wild tangent, making this crazy extended analogy, but it was fun and for me to do and for me to talk about. And as with all these experiences in our lives, they relate to each other in interesting ways sometimes. So I'm going to go spiralize some Kohlrabi, and I'll talk to you later. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.